Hi, good morning out there. My name is Dan Hayden here with the Seltzer Group. We're going to get started here in a few minutes. Just want to give a couple of extra moments for people to jump on in case they had coming off of other meetings or things like that. But if you give us a few moments, we'll get started here just a little bit after 10 o'clock. Everyone should be on mute, so no worries, not interrupting or anything like that. Uh, Looking forward to talking to you all here in a moment. So about 10 o'clock here. We are going to record this webinar is recorded. So if others need to view it later on, that's okay. You can always go back and watch it from the beginning. I think it's probably best, just in the interest of time, that we go ahead and get started. So hello, welcome. My name is Dan Hayden. I'm going to serve today as your host for the webinar. First and foremost, on behalf of the Seltzer Group and our partners, we'd like to offer our sincere hopes and wishes that you and your families are remaining safe during these difficult times. Please know that we're here with you, and if you need anything, if there's anything we can do to help you get through this, please let us know. So thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you being here. We're excited to be able to offer this webinar to you today and connect with you despite our social distancing. Special thanks goes out to our marketing department, led by Johnny Gray, who made this possible today. So thank you so much for allowing us to connect with our friends and colleagues and clients during these unprecedented times, for sure. So in the midst of this pandemic and in the midst of this unprecedented circumstance that we find ourselves in, we wanted to introduce to some and reintroduce to others our risk management partner, East Coast Risk Management. But before we get started, I just want to touch upon some quick household items just to get them out of the way. We want this to be an interactive conversation today, so please, we encourage dialogue and questions. We have everyone on mute just from an efficiency standpoint, but there is a Q&A feature if you hover over the bottom of your screen there, if you're in full screen mode. On the bottom toolbar, there's a Q&A section there. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please enter them into that Q&A box there. I'll monitor that through the webinar, and then at the end, we'll devote some time to responding to them. Johnny had mentioned not to use the chat box, but if you do, Johnny will reply to you on the side and just ask you to use the Q&A feature. We'd appreciate that. As I mentioned when we first got on, today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be available to the participants and to everyone else following the presentation, usually within 48 hours. So that recording will include my contact information and the other speakers' contact information on here as well, so you can reach out to us directly with your questions. So without further ado, I just wanted to make a couple of quick introductions, and then I'll turn it over to our team here. As I mentioned, my name is Dan Hayden. My title is Director of Risk Services for the Seltzer Group. Really what that means is that I'm your chief advocate for everything related to your operation from a risk perspective. My main objective is to protect the interest of your financial interest and serve those interests well, whether that be through an insurance policy or through some policies or procedures or operational aspects that you can maybe implement in your business. We're here to coordinate with outside safety consultants, insurance carriers, anyone else, any other third parties that we would need to engage to assist your business. So I'm here really as a quarterback to help manage your risk and make sure that we're doing everything we can to mitigate your exposure. We also have today with us Randy Grabiak. Randy Grabiak is a commercial lines account executive, although he'll refer to himself as a producer.
Right.
And don't let Randy's casual, laid-back demeanor fool you. He comes across as a very soft-spoken Western PA guy, but Randy is adept. He's very good at finding coverage deficiencies. He's very good at identifying risks and exposures that maybe you may not have been aware of as a business owner or business leader. Randy, as an account executive, is the face for you to insurance carriers. So he works for you. He doesn't work for the insurance company. His interests lie solely with you, and he's there to protect and serve those interests. His real objective is to make sure that we're telling your story as appropriate as possible, and especially during these difficult times, that he's using that story to market that out to carriers to make sure that you're getting the most competitive rates. So as your agent or your producer, so to speak, Randy really, again, is a jack of all trades in that, he's looking at your business from a holistic perspective, and he wants to make sure that, he's identifying any opportunities for you, or at least bringing them to your attention. And then whether it's wise or prudent to insure that risk, or to offset that risk, or to manage it somehow, some other way, then Randy's here to assist you with that. Also with us today, we have Cynthia Paisley. And Cynthia Paisley serves as the Vice President of Claims at East Coast Risk Management. And as I mentioned, that's our risk management partner here. Cynthia brings a great deal of knowledge and a tremendous background in the insurance world from a number of different vantage points, from the carrier side, from the legal side, from claims perspective, from a safety perspective, from a risk management perspective. So we're really lucky and fortunate to have Cynthia as a partner. Cynthia certainly will go into much more detail later on in our presentation about her role. But what we really like about Cynthia is that she's a tremendous source of information and a tremendous resource for us, especially in difficult markets like the transportation industry, especially, which for any of those that have those types of exposures will know that that's been very volatile in the most recent years, and will continue to be like that moving forward. So having Cynthia on board here is a tremendous asset for us. So those are our quick intros. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Cynthia. And Cynthia is going to walk through a presentation that she has, and she'll give you some background on the East Coast and talk about some different ways that her and her team can help our clients.
Thank you, Dan, and good morning, everyone. A good risk management program right now is more important than ever before. We are living in a changing world, and we are completely in uncharted waters. None of us have ever been here before. And the risks that we used to know as a business have tripled. There are new risks emerging to businesses, as a result of COVID-19. There's disruption of operations, there's impact on revenue, there's supply chain interruptions. The threat of cybersecurity with all our remote workers has greatly increased. And of course, there's that threat of widespread worker illnesses that we need to be aware of. And there's also a ton of new lawsuits out there for failure to provide adequate safety. Layoff trends have produced, more workers' comp claims, more EEOC claims, and regulations continue to change almost, it seems like, on a daily basis. So our risk management approach, we have partnered with Seltzer. We are a full service risk management team that attacks risk from all angles. So of course we have our claims management that we will talk a lot about today. But we believe the best way to handle a claim is to prevent it from happening in the first place. So we have 22 safety professionals on staff that are all things safety. We also have an HR team that is equipped with 2 on-staff attorneys that specialize in employment law, and they can help you with just about anything in terms of HR. And as we know, the root cause of claims usually boils down to either a safety or an HR issue. So this is the full circle of how we prevent claims, and then in the event they were to happen, how we manage it. And we do claims management in workers' comp, auto, general liability, and property. We take the approach from the employer's perspective. As Dan said, I've kind of been on all sides of this. I've been on the business side before. I was a corporate risk manager for a company. I know what that feels like. I know the challenges. So our approach is more related to how can we help you manage the claim in terms of what is best for your business. We actually become your in-house staff for claims, HR, and safety. So let's start with employee risk. There's tons of risk right now to your employees. And whenever we think about employee risk, we usually think about workers' comp claims. And we have a very aggressive approach to our workers' comp claims management. We actually start well before the claim even happens by creating, in directed care states such as Pennsylvania, we create panels. And panels is a list of physicians in which your employees can treat and should treat within the first 6 months in Pennsylvania. And we do that when we create a panel. We look at, do the physicians offer return to work? Do they understand return to work? Do they understand, the occupations that your company may have and some restrictions that they can give you where they keep working? We look at what is their time frame for scheduling? Is there a long interruption in that? If so, we probably wouldn't put them on your panel, because obviously we want to keep your people treating, because the claim will close quicker. We also score all our panels. We rate them. We give them a scorecard. So we have a ton of data. We have a ton of physicians that we work with. And what we do is we score them on how are they honoring the return to work, how the timeliness of appointments, the restrictions they give, all those factors. And if they drop below a certain score, they're off the panel. So we really do manage that from a proactive perspective. And then in the event a claim were to occur, we have a customized reporting portal where you would report the claim directly to us, and we would take a look at the claim. We would talk to you about it, and maybe it doesn't need to be reported to the carrier. Maybe it's just a precautionary claim so that it doesn't hit your loss run. And if it is one that should be reported, then we usually send that off to the carrier. We report it to them for you, but with our personalized recommendations on it. For an example, maybe you tell us, this is questionable. I don't think this happened at work. We're going to make sure the adjuster sees that right from the very beginning. Lately, we're helping a lot of companies about when to report a claim if it's COVID-19 related. We have some good protocols in place in terms of protecting you in the event legislation mandates coverage. So without, officially going on your loss run, we kind of hold the claim, maybe we report the claim, maybe we get a coverage determination, but all of that we can certainly help with. With the mass layoffs happening right now, whenever there's a mass layoff, there's usually workers' comp claims that are sure to follow. And that goes with also when people are called back from mass layoffs. They get used to staying home. Some people don't want to return to work. These are really red flags for us. So that good investigation into the claims, whether they're questionable or potentially fraudulent, we really want to dive deeper into that. We do full course and scope investigations. Maybe you have employees working from home where that is absolutely vital in terms of, was the injury related? Same with the COVID-19 claims, it all comes down to course and scope. We monitor all the medical care to keep the claim moving. And right now there are several options that an employee can choose from in terms of benefits. Is it the emergency FMLA? Is it the FFCRA? Is it unemployment? Is it workers' comp? We really try to prevent any double dipping. The opportunity is there. Government workers are completely overworked right now on the unemployment side, and we want to make sure that the carrier is not allowing that to happen. If they are receiving unemployment, it should definitely offset any workers' comp benefits they are receiving. And in addition, we specialize in a lot of return to work programs. We're very good at helping you create those positions that can actually sometimes benefit the company in great ways, such as maybe training other employees or job shadowing or English as a second language. And we've really created some great remote working programs so that they can return to work in this situation, even though there's no actual business to return to. So some of the results of all this aggressive claims management that I'm talking about with workers' comp result in minimized OSHA recordables, reduction in lost time claims, lower claims costs across the board. You want that optimal EMR or mod rate, as you may know it. And it's a better claims experience for you because you're kept informed along every step of the process is what we do. Dan or Randy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so Cynthia, you mentioned a couple of terms there. You mentioned loss run and you mentioned an experience mod. So, from my standpoint, one of the major things we look at, there's a lot of reasons why those things are important, but from a financial standpoint, it's good to point out that anytime you do have a claim for workers' comp, that claim is going to stay with you in your company for at least 3 years. So that just stresses the importance of handling these claims and preventing them if you can, just because if you do have a claim that does get a little bad or lingers, or the dollars add up for it, you're on the hook for that for 3 years. So that's 3 years you're paying for that one specific claim. So that's just stresses the importance of everything you just said there.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Randy. I totally concur with that. That's a great point that you make, is that, the experience modification factor, we call it a lagging indicator. So what happens now, and the way that the algorithm works in Pennsylvania, it's actually more than 3 years, actually 4 years. There's a 1 year waiting period, and then there's 3 years on top of that. So, an adverse claim that you have now, could stay with you here conceivably for, you're dealing with it for almost 4 years. Now, when we get into, and I'm sure Cynthia will speak later on about the real world implications of a high modification factor, it's not just increased premium. Now, or if you're a general contractor or subcontractor, you may not be as desirable anymore, and you may miss out on jobs. So there are certainly direct costs, and then there are certainly indirect costs. So what I like, and we'll talk more about this here in a moment, but it's an essential need, in my opinion, to have someone in your corner that has that does not have an interest from a carrier perspective. So we certainly appreciate Cynthia's team and all that they're able to offer in that respect.
That's an excellent way to describe what the mod or the EMR is. So thank you for that. And obviously, the higher the mod, the more premium it costs. I've managed a lot of adjusters in my time, and they are very, very hardworking people. But there's no reason for them to understand the mod or the AMR and what it does. There's just no reason for them and what they do every day. So it's really hard for them to look at reserving in terms of how it's going to impact that. So that's really the perspective that we offer. And when I talk about results, I like to walk the walk and not just talk about it. So here are the top 5 success stories that we've had with Seltzer clients. Again, the higher the mod, the more premium you pay. And here are 5 customers of Seltzer's in which the percentage drop in the mod over 3 years, those rates that you see there, minus 42%, a reduction by 41%. I mean, they are really, really great results in terms of mod experience, and a lot of cost savings there in terms of premium.
Yeah, and just to quantify this a little bit, one example we took a look at recently was, as a business that had a few hundred employees, and their mod, if they would have dropped their mod by just 20%, we were looking at about a $50,000 decrease in their workers' comp premium. So that's real-time dollars, and that's a lot of money that goes into this stuff. So, that's only a 20% decrease. So just something to think about when you're looking at these numbers and how this can impact you financially.
Absolutely. And as Dan said earlier, if you're a mod sensitive industry such as construction, a lot of your customers want that mod below a certain number. It's usually 1.0, right? So if it goes above that, you can actually lose work. And that was the industry that I was in. So we were really mod sensitive. So we paid really strict attention to it. So other than just the premium savings, there's a lot of potential opportunities out there for new work as well.
Yeah.
So this is the entire book of the Seltzer Group that we work with, that we partner with. And this is the average mod by calendar year. And you can see from 2018 to 2020, the mod is steadily declining, which is really, really great news. And that is a direct result of, the safety services, the active claims management, all very, very important to reducing that mod.
Randy, let me ask you a question, being that you're on the front lines of a lot of these conversations, when you're either speaking with, new clients or existing clients, how important to them is the safety culture that East Coast is able to create within their organization?
Well, yeah, it's extremely important, and unfortunately, a lot of the times that aspect can be overlooked When you're talking about experience mods and claims and everything, a lot of the times people focus on the dollars and how's that going to impact us financially. And unfortunately, what happens is sometimes the safety aspect of it, which is immensely important, does kind of get overlooked a little bit. But the other part of this is we want to make sure we have a great culture for our employees. We want them to feel safe. We want them to be able to get home to their families at the end of the day. And, the one thing also that gets overlooked a lot of times is if you do get injured at work, that injury doesn't stay with you just at work. That goes home with you as well.
Absolutely. No,
So
that's a great point.
It's going to impact you 24/7, whether you're at work or not. So, once you do boil down on some of those things, a lot of people do realize, yes, this is immensely important. We want our employees to feel safe. We want them to feel comfortable here. We don't want them to have to go home with an injury. So that's a huge aspect, along with the financial aspect with what East Coast does.
Absolutely. And what I see, when I'm out in the field and, speaking with clients or prospects or existing clients for that matter, to me, getting over the hurdle of identifying safety as not being a barrier to your business or an impediment to your business or another line item on your sheet. Actually, it's a complement to your business. It's a complementary feature of your business, and you can use it. You can leverage safety, to yield positive financial results. So this is one of those things where I think that the misconception is that I have to pay for a safety service, or I have to. This is just another expense for me, another line item for me. But we're not seeing the larger picture and what your return on investment yield you. So from a cost benefit perspective, we find it to be financially prudent to invest in your own people, invest in safety. And as I mentioned before, certainly there are direct and indirect costs when you have a claim. Direct costs would be the medical bills, lost wages, perhaps we can even attribute some premium correlation that's a surcharge that you might have because of your experience. But also, too, from an indirect perspective, now we're thinking about that's lost time, that's lost production. Maybe that's a decrease in employee morale. Maybe now people have to do a different job that they're not accustomed to that make up for others. Maybe we have to hire new people to come in and there's a slowdown. So it's not always what's right in front of you. And that's what I really appreciate about Cynthia and her team, is that we're able to develop this culture, and it starts from the top, it permeates throughout the organization. So everyone knows when they come to work that day that safety is at the forefront of their mind. So these results to me, are really important, because without them, we could just say, this is all theoretical. This sounds great, Dan, that sounds great on paper, but in reality, this is Cynthia eloquently puts it, we walk the walk. And that's really what I appreciate as well.
Yep. So another area that we handle is subrogation, and you may not be familiar with that word, but essentially, if you have a claim where someone else is responsible or liable for, we are entitled to go back after that money and get that back. And here's an example of a success story that we've recently had, where an employee from a Seltzer account sustained a workers' comp injury from a motor vehicle accident that occurred during the course of their employment. That motor vehicle accident was not the employee's fault. So what we did was we obviously went after the person at fault, and we managed that subrogation claim for over a year to get that money back that we paid out on workers' comp. But we didn't stop there. We wanted to make sure that that money came back. It also impacted that mod rate that we're talking about so much here today. And in fact, the Bureau did not have that calculated in, and we were able to get that accomplished, which resulted in Seltzer being able to return $26,959 in return premium to the client, which certainly made them very, very happy.
That's amazing. That's what an unbelievable, outcome there, Cynthia. And you're right. Subrogation is often an unknown part of the claims world from a layperson's perspective. And I could just tell you that later on today, in fact, I have a joint call with your team and the carrier. And the carrier, for their business purposes, are neglecting to pursue subrogation, and it's our duty and our responsibility to make them see the light of day, so to speak, and understand that it's not just their purse that's being affected by this, it's also our clients as well. And that's really our responsibility as their advocate to make sure that the carrier is exploring all options to remedy or to return any sort of premium that was paid that was undue. So we certainly appreciate that. What a great value and what a great tremendous asset. And I'm sure you'll agree from your carrier background days that, and mine as well, that often the carrier will look at it from a cost benefit perspective, and maybe at some point they'll say that they don't want to pursue subrogation for their own interests, but what's often missed or what's often left out is what's in the best interest of the client.
Exactly.
So it really takes someone like Randy and your team to be able to advocate for that. So this is a great example, and we love these examples. Hope and we know that they'll continue to occur. So thank you.
Yes, and that's not the only one. We've had a few of them recently.
Absolutely.
So return premium is always
keep them coming.
Yes, absolutely. That's our goal.
Right.
So just again with employee risks, you always think HR when you talk about employees, right? So we can help with full administration of FMLA claims. The emergency FML claims right now are really hot for us. Employers are confused on how to handle that, and we certainly offer those services as well. We have an HR helpline, and that's been utilized a lot lately as it relates to the FFCRA. Tons of questions about that, very, very confusing. Compliance-related training, employee handbooks, job descriptions. We even get into recruiting and performance management. So basically all things HR to kind of help with all those employees risk across the board. Our safety services in terms of employee, of course, we do hazard assessments and site safety audits, and we can develop a full written safety program. Tons of safety training that we offer, accident investigations, industrial hygiene right now, very, very important topic, social distancing practices. It's really confusing to go into a business and say, well, how do I accomplish this? We can walk you through that. Behavior-based safety, proper PPE right now. It's very difficult to get PPE, and when you go on the CDC website, you see different levels of, well, I only have this many. Am I in crisis mode? Am I in contingent mode? It can get very confusing. And of course, we offer a full pandemic plan that we can develop with execution. So Dan, Randy, anything about our HR safety services you'd like to add?
Well, I'd just like to stress the importance of safety services and safety training. So we've talked a lot about what East Coast does on the back end once a claim occurs, how we're mitigating those dollars, how are we closing the claim quickly, everything like that. I can't stress enough though how important it is. The best way to mitigate those claims is to prevent them from happening. And one of the ways to do that is to get some proper training, get your employees bought in, get them on board with some training aspects. So I cannot stress enough the importance of this. If you can prevent a claim from happening altogether, that's the best way to mitigate that.
Absolutely, Randy. I totally agree. This is harkening back to my comments earlier about investing in your organization from a safety perspective. One question I typically get from clients is, well, doesn't the insurance carrier provide that service already? Don't they do that for you? And in my experience, that answer spans the full gamut of insurance carriers. Depends on what carrier you're working with. And for the most part, the loss control experts at the carrier level, great people, very qualified, tremendous, they do tremendous work. However, there are limitations to what they're able to do. And what I especially like about East Coast is that if I have a complicated situation, or if I have an extreme need, if I have a high hazard industry that's very technical, very specialized, that I am overwhelmed and impressed by the talent that East Coast has from a safety professional standpoint. We have safety professionals with tremendous backgrounds in very specific, detailed, technical areas. So, the carrier, absolutely, there's a little bit of what they can help out with, but they know their limitations, and they'll raise their hand and say, this is beyond my scope of expertise, and I need to bring in someone else like an East Coast risk management. So for me, as the quarterback of this whole, and that's the analogy I like to use, there are times certainly when it might be appropriate to bring in the carrier partner. But more often than not, what I'm finding is that they're limited from a geographic perspective. Maybe they're not in certain areas. Maybe a capacity standpoint, they have so many other clients that they have to service in a given territory. Especially now, where there's a tremendous ask and need for these types of services, they're stretched very thin. From a budgetary perspective, they have considerations as well. So more often than not, we're bringing in East Coast risk management to help out with these issues, because not only are they extremely technically savvy and very competent, and very professional and efficient, but also they're accessible, which is what we like. They're going to be in your backyard. These are people that live and work in our area, which is nice. They're not coming from all around our country. So Randy hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. From a proactive perspective, this is absolutely something that we strongly encourage clients to engage in. But Cynthia, just getting back before you move on really quick, your HR services, I can't speak enough about how vital, especially in our current climate that we find ourselves in, from a HR perspective, from a liability standpoint, employment practices. I don't know how often, or I don't know if our clients are fully aware that because of your relationship here with us at the Seltzer Group, you have unfeathered access to East Coast Risk Management HR service. There's a hotline you can call. It's amazing. If I have a question about hiring or firing or employee handbooks, or, hey, this happened here at work, I don't know what to do. What's the latest on COVID? What do I have to do from a COVID-19 compliance or regulatory perspective, from OSHA or CDC guidelines? I need some help here. And we're finding that, these aren't just small one-man band operations that may not have the infrastructure to support an internal HR department. These services are being, provided to a full range, it's full spectrum of different types of businesses, medium, small, large, it doesn't matter. So even those that have full-time HR representatives, it's great to be able to pick up the phone and have access to your team, Cynthia, there, because as you alluded to before, this is becoming a pressing issue. This is one of the, I would say, the consequences of our COVID-19 pandemic circumstances is the potential rise in EPLI, or employment practices liability insurance claims, allegations about, wrongful termination or mismanagement of benefits, or coordination of benefits, or, not allowing, the proper FMLA. These are uncharted territories that we find ourselves in. So I strongly implore you to reach out to East Coast and engage your HR team for support on that end. Don't try to do it alone, and don't try to assume that you have all the right answers. So, because this is definitely going to be one of the rising exposures that we see from an insurance standpoint. So thank you again.
Absolutely. We'd love to do that. And our HR team is phenomenal. And what we get a lot of on our HR helpline is actually HR professionals just needing to talk it out. Because these regulations are so new, they may be experts in HR, but sometimes you just need to talk out that situation, get a second opinion, all great stuff. And, if you're a mid-sized company, you may only have an HR professional, not a safety professional, or vice versa. So we really try to fill in those gaps of your business. And the other thing in that's different from our safety than, that of a carrier, all our services are very customizable. So we actually take a look at your losses and listen to what you're saying to us, what the problems may be. And we develop a plan for you that's actually going to help you prevent losses from happening in the first place. A lot of those safety services from the carrier side are strictly compliant related. We actually want to add value and to stop those losses. So whether you need certain safety services and certain HR services, or maybe you just need claims management, we really do try to customize that program for the client. But we do have our best results when all services are implemented from an HR claims and safety perspective. And here is the example of our full service clients that you can see the frequency in injuries has dropped over 61% within 3 years. So that's a lot of claims prevented. I always say in safety, it's hard to know, you don't really get a reward because you don't know what you prevented, but we can actually tell now, we can see the decrease in the frequency happening.
That's excellent, Cynthia. And Randy, I'm just curious from your perspective, when you're speaking with carriers, when you're presenting a client's business to carriers, when you're marketing it or shopping it, so to speak, how important is it to be able to demonstrate or articulate that you're bringing a client to them that has an East Coast risk management relationship? What does that do, and how does that differ from a client that does not have that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's immensely important. I can't stress enough how important it is. And I'll give you an example. We added a new client just this year who had a little bit of a higher experience modifier. Their experience modifier was about a 1.7, which unfortunately isn't great. However, when we were shopping and talking to all the carriers and telling their story, we did mention, hey, we have this relationship with East Coast Risk Management. Here's all the aspects East Coast provides. And it's just amazing when you're talking to a carrier, when you explain all the things that you're doing and talking about East Coast and explaining everything that they bring to the table. Not that the mod disappears, because it doesn't, but it certainly changes their outlook on that client. They're not just looking at somebody that has a high experience modifier. Now they're looking at somebody that, okay, they're certainly taking precautions. They're turning things around. We like the direction they're headed. They're going to get a little bit more of a favorable, or a lot more favorable look. So I cannot stress enough how important that is. Carriers really appreciate, and they really take into account relationships that you do have with a risk management company, just like East Coast.
That's an excellent point, Randy, because so many times we'll get the underwriting guidelines and we can pinpoint what is important to the underwriter, where they're going to get a better rate, or maybe they're not being renewed, and we could really formulate a plan, again, completely customized.
That's excellent. To me, that's the key differentiator here. Now, Randy, I'm going to ask you a tough question here, buddy, so don't mind. That's easy when the modifier is high, right? When things are going bad, that's an easy answer. Hey, we have East Coast Risk Management. We have this, tremendous customized, program that we're going to implement to address these issues. We're expecting, a turnaround, from a mod standpoint. We're going to improve things. What about when things are going well? What if my mod is, let's say, if I'm receiving a credit mod, it's less than 1.0? Is East Coast Risk Management still important for your clients?
Well, absolutely. And the reason is nobody's perfect. Just because the mod you might be getting a credit, that doesn't mean that claims aren't happening. That doesn't mean that people aren't getting injured. That doesn't mean that there might be some piece that's missing. We like to think of it, and I like to explain it to companies. The companies and the accounts we work with, they're experts at what they do. They need to focus on their business. They need to run their business, and allow an expert to come in and do these things for them. So just because they do have, they're getting a credit, or they have a little bit of a better experience modifier, that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't something missing there, or there might not be an area of opportunity. And when you're talking about safety, and when you're talking about making sure your employees get home to their families at night, I don't think that you can overlook that aspect. Even if they have a good experience modifier, and we might be able with East Coast to identify, okay, we're noticing these things, guys. This could potentially, be a problem. This could cause an injury. You don't want to overlook that. One thing that goes wrong could spell a disaster, unfortunately. So, the East Coast works for everybody, because again, nobody's going to be perfect, and there's always going to be some area you can improve upon.
Right. And I think that gets back to what we said before. One bad year sticks around with you. It's not one and done. You're living with that for, like I said, pretty much 4 years. So, I think that's a great point, is that, East Coast doesn't always fit just for those that are in need, in having a desperate situation with a high mod. It's also important for, those that are doing well, and to help them continue to do well.
Absolutely. So I think we touched base on everything for employee risk, but when you think about facility and fleet risks, I'm not sure, we've all heard so much lately about, proper hand washing and proper coughing and sneezing and PPE, but I'm not sure if employers are aware that OSHA has implemented an enforcement plan of action specific to the coronavirus disease. And they are conducting inspections of facilities based upon two things: outbreaks as well as employee complaints. So if employees start to complain to OSHA, I don't feel safe, I feel like there's a COVID-19 threat, they can come in and do an inspection. It's actually happening in my area a lot right now. And some things that we can help with, and some things you should be thinking about if that were the case, is that proper sanitization in accordance with CDC guidelines. But also, you know, OSHA loves to cite on ventilation systems. So improving your ventilation system, maybe adjusting the rates or adding a HEPA filter, absolutely crucial right now. And again, that social distancing, what measures have you taken so that OSHA would come in and say, yes, they have done everything reasonable. In terms of fleet safety, it is definitely a specialty of ours. We, you know, conduct DOT audits, best practices for hiring drivers, proper drug testing, DOT requirements. We do all kinds of defensive driver training as well. Just a little example, and Randy, I think you were alluding to this earlier, with regards to how we impact the carrier. So Seltzer had a potential client, not yet a Seltzer client, that was going to not be renewed in their commercial auto, which unfortunately in commercial auto happens a lot. And Seltzer came in and worked with us, and we came up with this plan in terms of how this company was going to become safer. And that included our HR and our safety services. And Seltzer was able to get them renewed, which certainly saved the client a lot of money and the headache of changing carriers. If you ever changed carriers before, you know it could be kind of a nightmare. And great success story there. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about auto and GL claims management, it's really mimics what I described in our workers' comp. You know, we have the customized claim reporting portal. We identify Subro. One area that I see a lot in auto is someone who's making their own in-house repairs. If they were involved in an accident that wasn't their fault and the vehicle comes in and it's maybe, you know, a $1,500 repair, they'll fix it themselves and that's the end of it. But you're actually entitled to get that money back. So we walk you through the process of how to do that, and then we actually file the claim for you and get your money back. And because auto and GL are known to have really high fraudulent claim activity, we really take an aggressive approach here. We secure all video sources. In auto, if you're on the road, odds are there's usually a camera somewhere around. If you don't have telematics, there could be nearby businesses or traffic cameras. And one video source that is always overlooked by adjusters is the police body camera or dash camera. You can actually capture some great footage on those. And for some reason, adjusters just aren't obtaining the footage. So we always want to get that. I've been able to capture, you know, people admitting that the accident was their fault. I've been able to capture, you know, road rage, where someone was hitting someone with their right hand and then claimed a right hand injury afterwards. So you never know what you're going to get from those video sources, and we want to be aggressive about it. Fair property evaluations. If you have specialized equipment and your adjuster's just going to send it to the local body shop, that's where we step in, and we want to get you the fair value for your equipment and your vehicles. And of course, we get involved in all the negotiation, the settlement, the litigation management. It is really full life cycle claims management. In GL, we specialize in identifying risk transfer opportunities. There could be several contracts involved with all kinds of indemnification clauses that can be confusing. We want to make sure that any potential risk transferring that risk does occur. And our approach in terms of auto and GL is that we are fearless, but not reckless. So we do take a very, very aggressive approach in defending these claims, but we're not going to be reckless about it either. If you were at fault, we want to get the claim paid and moved on as quickly as possible. Dan, Randy, do you have anything to add to that?
Only that, you know, I can just personally attest that, you know, it makes a tremendous difference, you know, for our clients, you know, when we're working through a claim scenario, to have someone that's in their corner that's not representing the carrier. Someone that's independent, that has the interests of the client, the insured at heart, that they work for them. To me, you know, to be able to have that separation is really important. And, you know, adjusters, you know, in my experience, you know, absolutely, they're there to do a great job. However, they don't have the same motives or same motivation that obviously the client does. And to have someone that is, you know, their advocate in their corner, you know, is a great difference maker in my opinion. So we certainly endorse that. We appreciate all the great work that your team does to that end.
So, and Dan, you were on the carrier side, and you know what adjusters and their performance metrics. One of the adjusters' performance metrics is closing ratios. Well, I always viewed that as anyone can overpay a claim to get the claim closed, and then they hit their performance metric.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. From a KPI, key performance indicator perspective, carriers, they love to quantify everything. They love to QA everything. And closing ratios, the number of claims you bring in versus the number of claims you close out that month is a key metric. And me, I would be motivated because I want to have a great closing ratio each month, because at the end of the year, when bonus time comes around, they're going to look back at my stats and say, Dan, you had an excellent closing ratio for these months, and now we're going to pay you more. So to me, that motive and that incentive, it must be taken into account. And not to say that, we're closing claims that shouldn't be closed, or, do claims, are they overpaid? Absolutely. Are they over-reserved? Absolutely. Do we have reserve rationale that supports that reserve, or, is that carrier just being conservative and cautious and we're over-reserving? Does the adjuster know what that reserve means to a client that's potentially looking to renew their business? I could tell you as an underwriter and as an adjuster both, I didn't know what the other departments were doing. I didn't know what the impact the reserve had on the renewal, and vice versa. As an underwriter, I didn't know what the details of that claim. And it's designed like that to have that silo effect from an operational standpoint. So it's important to have a neutral third party out there that has the interest of the client at heart, that can cut through and navigate these things and explain the connection between a reserve on the claim side and the renewal on the underwriting side. And to be able to bridge that gap there is something that your team does very well. And I'm glad to be able to have you guys as a partner for that reason.
Absolutely. And carriers do have a tendency to err on the side of caution and over reserve. Our average monthly reserve reduction for clients is $300,000 a month.
Wow.
So obviously, they're on the side of caution, where we're fighting for the employers and the businesses and saying, they're too high. You got to lower these reserves. You can get a better result than that is really where we step in. I had mentioned earlier that, wherever there's crisis, the plaintiff attorneys are sure to follow. And COVID-19, no exemption from that. We see litigation popping up all over the place. You're probably familiar with the Diamond Princess cruise. There's now 6 lawsuits surrounding that cruise ship. There's all kinds of class actions happening out there. There's restaurants being sued. So we want to just talk briefly about how to defend yourself against a potential third-party lawsuit. And when I say third party, that's someone other than your employee, a customer, a vendor. And if your policy has the communicable disease exclusion on it, it may result in no coverage. The insurance carrier may temporarily defend you under a duty to defend, but if you have that exclusion, the policy really isn't going to respond. So just some tips on how to protect yourself from that. You want to have the right plan in place to prevent the spread of COVID, but you can have the best plan in place, but if you're not communicating it and you don't train your employees on it, I've been involved in a lot of litigation and it's usually deemed ineffective. So you want to communicate, you need to train your employees on it. It has to be in accordance with the CDC guidelines, which seems to change on a regular basis. So you want to continue to modify that plan as needed. You want to keep accurate records. Any type of positive test or anybody sick, you want to keep records of that, as well as all the things you're doing to prevent the spread. You want to document it. You want to be able to prove it in a court of law that this is what you did. And of course, if you could have the best plan, the best training, and everything perfect, but if you don't know if your employees are complying with that, that also creates a potential problem in litigation. So have an audit process in place. If you're telling them to wear PPE and you're supplying the PPE, how do you know they're doing that? Whether it's a safety manager or a supervisor, you have to have some type of formal audit in place to make sure that it's being complied to. And of course, we can help with all of that in the event you don't have those So Dan or Randy, if you have anything you want to add before we move to the question and answers?
I was just going to say that, thank you, Cynthia, and I know that we're painting a very uncertain landscape at the moment. And the reality is that that's the world that we're living in at present. And unfortunately, not to sound like a doomsday person or, an alarmist, but I feel like, this is only the tip of the iceberg. And as Cynthia, as you said, when there's crisis, we find, that litigation is coming out of from all different angles. Randy and I were just speaking to a firm the other day in central Pennsylvania, and so they can't keep up with the amount of defense work they're getting from. And I asked them, is that purely from general liability or what? What are you seeing? And he said, really, it's everything. It's workers' comp, it's employment practices, a lot of general liability. So these are a lot of issues that, unfortunately, just because of COVID-19, the pandemic, this sort of is a time when claimants or plaintiffs out there are looking to take advantage of situations. So I certainly, would strongly recommend, reaching out to us and to get in touch with Cynthia's team to find out what are some ways that we can help you do that. I think, before we get into any questions and answers, Cynthia, I would say that, thank you for, bringing a lot of these issues to the forefront. I know that there were a lot of things we talked about today, but I'm sure you'll agree that that's just a small snapshot of really what's out there.
It is. And thank you for having me. But over this past weekend, watching television, because there's not much else to do these days, you see the commercials from the attorneys already. Did you have a workers' comp claim close and are now laid off due to, economic reasons? You can potentially have your workers' comp claim reopened. So it's really important that you have the right people on your side and defending you, because there's no mercy on that side, and you need someone that's going to really stand up for you and defend your business, essentially. And Dan and Randy, thank you so much for having me here today. I love what we do. I love protecting, businesses, and the Seltzer Group is amazing to work with. So thank you.
Our pleasure, Cynthia. Thank you. And I'll just close out by saying, I know that we don't have any questions here from the group, from the audience. And I know there was a lot of information that was thrown at you today, and it might take some time for it to sink in and for it to resonate with you. You will be receiving a copy of this webinar, and in that copy, you'll have the contact information for myself and for Randy. And please, if you have any specific questions that maybe you can't think of at the moment, but maybe later on today or some other time it hits you, feel free to reach out to us. And if you'd like to learn more about how we as the Seltzer Group and East Coast Risk Management can help you and protect your financial interests, we strongly encourage you to reach out to us. So, Randy, any other closing thoughts or comments?
No, I just want to thank Cynthia again for all the great information. And please don't hesitate to reach out to Dan or myself. Very happy to help out, even if it's a minute or two phone call. Just a quick question. We're here to serve you. We're here to help out.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Be well. Hopefully, we'll see each other soon. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everyone.